President William Ruto's United Nations General Assembly trip was less about handshakes in New York and more about shaking up global systems.
Madam President,
He painted a vision of an Africa that builds its own credit rating agencies, finances its own health future, and powers its growth through renewable energy.
The Kyrgyz Republic.
Flanked by fellow African leaders, Ruto carried a serious agenda, taking on global leadership and entrenched systems.
The World Bank and IMF were built by others, the way we are building ours. So even as we seek to reform World Bank and IMF and all those other institutions, we must also begin by building our own institution, by believing in ourselves and putting our resources in those institutions.
African leaders delivered a bold call. Africa must build its own financial systems, lead its own health agenda, and power its future with climate justice.
But there is no problem with us having an African credit rating agency. At the very minimum, it will become a reference point, and others will begin to know that we are developing the skills for running a credit rating agency, and we can correct some of the anomalies they constantly level against our countries.
The first jab came at a meeting on Africa's debt crisis, where Ruto pushed for a radical alternative to Western-led financial systems. He accused global lenders of punishing Africa with unfair terms and heavy conditions.
Ladies and gentlemen, we must develop our own institutions. It is not so that we can substitute those which exist, but it is because it is necessary for us to have homegrown solutions, institutions that understand our terrain, understand our customs, understand how we do stuff, and work with us from a position of knowledge.
Somalia's Hassan Sheikh Mohamud echoed the call.
As African government, it is our duty to work together to create a strong continental financial architecture that allows us to trade and pay for goods and services in a timely and predictable manner.
And Ghana's John Dramani Mahama sharpened the debate, saying Africa's future rests not with foreign multinationals, but with small businesses.
The only way we can emancipate ourselves economically is to have a financial infrastructure that understands the continent. We have the multilateral lending agencies, and all of them understand our private sector, including our culture, and know how to create instruments that will help especially small and medium enterprises.
The same message of self-reliance echoed in the fight against malaria. At a global health forum, Ruto unveiled Kenya's universal health financing model, framing malaria elimination not as aid, but as justice.
at the same time, Excellencies, we must speak truth. We must speak the truth. The global health architecture remains unbalanced. Africa cannot continue to be the last in the line for vaccines, diagnostics, and treatment. Equity is not charity. It is justice. We therefore call for fair pricing, meaningful technology transfer, inclusive research and development, and sustained investment in Africa's manufacturing.
Botswana's Duma Boko backed the push with a call for a second malaria booster program under the World Bank.
As ALMA, we are calling on the World Bank International Development Association funding to establish a second malaria booster program.
On climate, Ruto's voice was sharper still. He rejected the idea that growth and climate action are enemies, pointing to Africa's renewable energy potential.
Africa is already stepping up. At this year's Africa Climate Summit, 8 leading African financial institutions signed a cooperation framework to unlock US dollars 100 billion in investment capital. At the same time, when the world risks fragmentation
and a retreat into transactional politics, Africa is leaning forward to shape its own destiny.
And he reminded the world that Kenya has already submitted its ambitious NDC 3.0 while others stall.
That was the spirit of the Second Africa Climate Summit, where Africa asserted its agency, spoke with one voice, and demanded that global commitments be honored.
From finance to health to climate, Ruto's message was consistent. Africa will no longer beg for solutions, it will build its own. He also demanded 2 permanent seats for Africa on the UN Security Council, insisting reform is not charity but survival.
Africa dominates most of the Security Council agenda, provides some of the largest contingents of UN peacekeeping forces, and bears the heaviest costs of instability. Yet we remain the only continent without a permanent seat at the main table, where decisions about our destiny are made. Africa deserves, ladies and gentlemen, at the very least, 2 permanent seats with full rights, including the right to veto, and 2 additional non-permanent seats on the United Nations Security Council. The world must understand that reforming the Security Council is not a favor to Africa or to anybody. It is a necessity for the United Nations' own survival.
In New York, Ruto's words carried the cadence of an African statesman. He spoke in we, not I, framing Africa's future as a collective journey. His message was clear. Africa is not waiting to be invited to the table. It is pulling up its own chair. Eunice Omolo, Kembe Media.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces.